Hi everyone, welcome again to another lecture from Introduction to Public Speaking. Today I want to talk a little bit about the idea of visual aids. And some of you are going to be using visual aids for your presentations. Others of you will choose not to. It's up to you. Visual aids are not required for this particular presentation, for any of your speeches actually for this particular semester. However, that may change in the future, but all of you will probably use visual aids at some time in your career, in whether it be in your job here at Bridgewater State, whatever it might be. So I want to give you some tips on how to use visual aids. I'm actually going to show you a short clip from a speech that I think does a really good job of visual aids. It's an informative speech on the Great Wall of China. I won't show the whole thing, but you can actually find this on YouTube. I'll actually post it as part of in the week 5 discussions with regard to visual aids, and you can watch the whole speech if you'd like. And just kind of go from there. So today we're really going to focus on the idea of what's the difference between audio and visual aids in the speech making process, explain different types of audio and visual aids, and then identify different kind of factors you might consider when doing different kind of visual aids. Most of you are probably going to use some kind of presentation software, PowerPoint in some way, shape, or form. Some of you might try to use audio or video clips. We'll talk about how you might want to do that. But one of the keys that I want to set out at the very beginning that your book doesn't cover is that visual aids can be very useful, but they are visual aids, meaning that they do not dominate your conversations. Do not let your visual aid be the crux of your presentation. What should be the crux of your presentation is what comes from you, and the visual aids aid in the process and the comprehension of what you're trying to get across. Too many students will often use a video clip that's 2 or 3 minutes long or whatever it might be, and they will just say, well, the video explains my point. Never ever let the visual aid explain something for you. You explain the visual aid to us. You must provide that kind of explanation, because without it, you really don't kind of you allow someone else to be your voice, and you want to be the voice for your own particular project. And that applies in any situation, whether you're in this particular class, or if in your another class in marketing, you're doing a presentation, whatever it might be. Okay, so visual aids are certainly important. So messages have certainly become more visual than ever before. People like a lot of pictures and so forth. We'll talk a little bit about this when we get to persuasion, but one of the things I have mentioned before, one of the more significant persuasive ads out there is that ad of the ASPCA, where they've got the Sarah McLachlan song in the background, and Angel, and now they've stopped using that ad for a couple of years now, but you still see these the appeals of these dogs and these cats who are shivering and in the cold, and have these chains and are injured, and I'm like, I don't know about you, but I either have to give to the ASPCA, which I try to do on a regular basis, or I have to change the channel, because those images are just so powerful. And those they say an image is worth 1,000 words, and in today's culture, when you have such a mediated kind of fragmented audience, certainly those images are certainly important, especially when we're dealing with different kind of places and so forth that we don't necessarily have any connection with. Those pictures, for if you have people suffering in places like Syria, or you have famine in Africa, or if you have even just like flooding and natural disasters in the United States. I remember, over a decade ago with Hurricane Katrina, what a disaster, and the pictures that people showed, just the houses being flooded and people's lives being destroyed. It makes your heart go out to them and want to help them. And those visual aids become really prominent, and actually galvanizing many people to action and so forth. So audiences receive a lot, 80% of their information from sight. Maybe you see this, a food ad, right? You see, oh my gosh, that Taco Bell. There's a reason why they put all the good Taco Bell commercials at midnight. They call it fourth meal for a reason. So, if you think about that kind of stuff, or if they put all the food ads right during the cartoons right after school, and so forth, or the toys and all that other kind of stuff when kids are paying attention. Those visual aids certainly interact with our brains, and they want us to make us to buy stuff or be empathetic with different kind of plights around the world, but certainly they have an impact on what we're doing. They certainly help us organize main ideas, especially if it's something complex. I mentioned before when I was talking about different topics about it, I had a student who did a really, really good speech on the BMW M Class. And apparently the BMW M Class, and I'm taking from his speech, is considered to be the preeminent luxury vehicle, particularly for BMW, perhaps of all the luxury vehicles on the market. Now, I've seen an M Class before, but I just couldn't visualize it in my head, and my biggest critique of his speech was it would have been so much better if we would have actually gotten some pictures of what an M Class BMW looks like. What is the fundamental differences in compared to luxury cars? And he didn't provide that. And even when he had a chance to revise his speech, he didn't provide that. And I think that would have just enhanced his presentation. Some of you are going to probably want to use visual aids, especially if you're talking about something that's medical in nature. If you're talking about the brain, or if you're talking about a body part, or whatever it might be, you're going to want to show some kind of visual aid, whether that be through PowerPoint or whatever it is. And you can use that, and we'll talk about what different visual aids you might be able to use. Okay. Of course, the different benefits, it aids in our comprehension. We already kind of mentioned that. It assists in the persuasion process. Again, we already kind of mentioned that, persuading me to shell out hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to the ASPCA and other organizations. And of course, you remember a lot more when you actually see that visually, and you can connect the words with some kind of larger visual message. Okay? So when it talks about the different kinds of presentational aids, we can use humans, props and models, photographs, graphs, audio, visual clips, and presentation software. Presentation software can certainly be part of that. You can often embed some of these items into that presentation software. We're talking about presentation software, we're talking about PowerPoint or Prezi, which is the most common. If you decide to use that, for example, if you decide to do your speech in, say, a classroom, you don't have to do it at home if you don't want to. You can do it in a classroom and record yourself. But if you decide to do that, and use PowerPoint, you're more than welcome to do so. So when we're talking about things like humans, how can a human be an effective visual aid? Well, for example, if you're trying to demonstrate CPR, right, you could actually have someone lie on the floor. Hopefully it's someone who wants to get, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation or have chest compressions put upon them. You can use them as a visual aid, or if you want to demonstrate to someone the Heimlich maneuver, or how to save someone's life, or whatever it is, you can actually use and prop different human beings in different ways to demonstrate how something works. So some kind of demonstration speech with humans would certainly work. Okay. A prop or a model, you can, I remember when I was doing a speech in college, I actually had a prop. I did a speech on what is called melatonin. Some of you might know it. It's a natural substance in the body, and at the time, 20 years ago, when they were talking about melatonin and so forth, and they're discovering all the health benefits, people were all the rage. They thought it was like a fountain of youth. And I said at the very beginning, I held up a little melatonin pill that I got from the bottle you can buy. You can buy a bottle of melatonin pills for fairly cheap. It's like buying a vitamin in the store. But I said this pill has potentially the ability to change the world. And then went on to my speech. And that little prop, you would think this little thing, And so you can do that in your own presentations. If there's something that you have, if you want to do a demonstration speech or something, if you want to, show up, a model. If you wanted to do a car, for example, and you actually want to show a model of a car, you could say this is what it looks like, instead of showing up pictures or something. You're more than welcome to do so. Again, that visualization helps us figure out what you're trying to present on. Okay? Photographs can certainly be effective. The danger of photographs and some other smaller visual aids is that when you're doing these kinds of presentations at home and so forth, and you're trying to get somebody else to record it, it's important that you try to zoom in on those visual aids so that I and other people can see it. So it's important that we can actually see your visual aids and demonstrate how they work and so forth. But the key with visual aids is actually talking about them. So depending on when they come into your speech, it's not enough to just say, you know, you're going to show up a photograph. You have to talk about what that photograph is demonstrating, or talk about what that poster is demonstrating, or that, you know, or that model, or presentation, or whatever it might be. Okay. A chart, certainly charts can be used to communicate different kinds of statistics or graphs. This is especially true if you're trying to communicate, you know, different kinds of economic models, or if you're trying to project growth, or, you know, in a company, or, you know, that stuff is utilized all the time if you're trying to communicate, you know, using pie graphs or pie charts to demonstrate how many people have access to one thing and don't have access to another. You know, they can have a real visual impact on kind of remembering, you know, why this particular subject is important. Again, the functions of visual aids are to aid your presentation. They help with comprehension, they help with persuasion, and they help stick those ideas in your mind. You shouldn't use visual aids that don't directly relate to your presentation. You shouldn't just find a random pictures, put them together and call them visual aids, because they're not aiding your presentation. They should be directly related to what you're talking about. Okay? So bar graphs certainly would be another different kind of charts. If you want to create your own charts, you can go to the dollar store and, you know, get poster board if you want to. When we start doing and talking about different kinds of speeches to, you know, kind of model, and for you to do your kind of different reflections on, and to do this discussion forums, I'll put up different kinds of speeches that students have done at home, where they've actually done their own kind of visual aid that can perhaps help us comprehend what their entire speech is about. Some do it well, some others don't do it well. So we'll take a look at a variety of speeches as we kind of move to our first speech, which is the informative, in a couple weeks. Okay. Audio and visual clips. Okay. Let me just say about audio visual clips. I think one of the key things, one, audio or visual clips should be short. No more than 20 to 30 seconds, depending. A lot of times people will use an audio or a visual clip for an introduction. If you're going to do that, I think that's perfectly fine, but you must interpret what's going on for us. You can't just show an audio clip or a video clip and say, I'm done. What's going on in this video? Interpret the data for us, all right? Don't let it just stand alone. You know, again, a picture shows 1,000 words, but a lot of times, you know, you want to provide that interpretation. You want to provide that specific kind of message, because depending on what you're showing me, it could mean a whole host of different things. I'm trying to get what your message is, and that's why it's important for you to interpret what those particular pictures are. Okay? The different kinds of presentation software. Most people will use PowerPoint. Okay? Most people are pretty familiar with PowerPoint. It's pretty easy. GoAnimate, SlideRocket are good for if you want to do video and so forth. Google Docs are better when you're trying to work one-on-one with people. They don't necessarily work as well, I think. And Prezi is kind of fancy if you want to kind of do like zoom in and out and so forth. But actually, most of you will probably use PowerPoint. And so one of the things I want to do before I leave you is show you what I think is a good PowerPoint presentation. When you're using PowerPoint, or you're using visual aids in general, one of the keys is, especially if you're using PowerPoint, you don't want to leave your slides up for the entire presentation. So let's say you're giving your speech, you've got a picture of beeswax, you know, going back to that example and what it looks like. So you'll put a picture up and you're trying to talk about the structure of what beeswax looks like or what it does. And so then you move on to your next point, and if you keep the image of the beeswax up there, it actually detracts from your presentation. What you should do is you should actually have a slide that's either black in nature or blank, so it's blank in the background so that it doesn't detract from your presentation. Or if you are done with a photograph or an audio clip or whatever it may be, it should be taken away from your presentation. Either you exit out, on your computer, you put it down, anything that would detract from your presentation, from your specific kind of oral presentation, should be taken away. So let me show you an example of what I think is going on, and I'll kind of walk you through why I think this is a good presentation. I'll only show you maybe a minute or two, and we'll go from there. Okay? So this is a speech, again, on the Great Wall of China. Okay? And then you can, hopefully you'll be able to do this.
In China, there's a saying, you won't be considered a great person until you've been to the Great Wall. I visited the wall last year while I was in China. I don't know if it made me a great person, but I do know that the wall is indeed great. As you can see from this photograph, the wall is great in beauty, with its long arms resting on rolling hills and its towers peering across the valleys. The wall stretches across more than half of China, from the sea in the east past Beijing to Gansu province in the west. At a total length of 4,000 miles, it is the longest human-made construction in the world. If the Great Wall were transported to the United States and stretched out in a straight line, it would run from New York City completely across the Atlantic Ocean, past Spain, England, and France, and all the way to Berlin, Germany. Today, I would like to share with you some of the wonders of the Great Wall.
So notice that when he's emphasizing and when he's talking, his visual images are representative of what he's talking about. You know, that slide where he's talking about how it stretches out across. He's got a visual slide. But as soon as he's done with that, he goes to a blank slide because he's done with that particular part of his presentation. That's a really, really effective way of focusing what we're doing on your particular, or focusing on the presentation itself and those images in the background not detracting from that presentation. So many students decide to leave PowerPoint slides up and they move on to something else and it has nothing to do with what they're presenting on. And I would say this, whatever presentation, any kind of visual aid must be for exactly what you're talking about in that moment. If it's not, then get rid of it in some way, shape, or form. Put a blank slide up if you're using PowerPoint. Put the object or prop down. Put it aside, whatever it is. Focus on the presentation. The visual aids, again, are meant to aid your presentation. So let me forward real quick through this. And again, I'll show you something a little better. Okay. Actually go toward the end. Okay. So you'll notice
6 BC to 220 AD. The wall further until it reached its current level.
Okay, so this part of the speech, it's kind of his final point. He's talking about the different kind of periods of the wall. And the great thing that Mark does is that you'll notice that he has a picture, he has a title at the top, and his writing is really sparse when it comes to PowerPoint. And that's the key to doing a lot of PowerPoint slides. And unfortunately we don't have that with some of the slides that I've constructed, and also some of the slides that come from your textbook. The PowerPoint, it doesn't necessarily do as good of a job compared to, say, Mark when he's doing his presentation. A lot of times there's too much text. You don't want to have too much text on your PowerPoint slides. You don't want to have everything, because if that's the case, then why don't I just read your PowerPoint slides instead of you talking about your particular subject. Let me give you where I think it's particularly effective and how he puts that together, coming in a slide that's coming up.
Right. Builders of the Ming Wall made 3 important architectural advancements which resulted in the distinctive features of the wall as it exists today. You can see those features especially well in this photograph. First, rather than using earth and stone, they used kiln-fired bricks to create a stronger wall. Second, they erected more than 3,000 beacon towers to watch the mountain pass for potential invaders. These towers rise from the wall like mighty outposts and are one of the most striking aspects of the wall when you see them in person. Third,
So notice that you've got this wonderful picture of the Great Wall of China, you've got the features of the wall, and you've got very, very brief summaries of what he's talking about. So he has just a phrase, and then he talks about that specific aspect for a few sentences. Then he flashes again with a phrase, talks about that and the width of the wall, all working together to do a really effective job of presenting this to his audience. And you'll notice, and again, I'll post this particular speech on Blackboard and so forth, but throughout the entire speech, when he doesn't have when he's not talking directly about the Great Wall of China as it relates to something that he's got, he puts in a blank slide in between his presentations, and he times those things out. So you know exactly where he is, but his visual presentation is always connected to a specific spot within the speech itself. And once he's done with that, he moves on to a blank slide, and then when he's done, with that small portion, then he moves on to another visual image. All done very, very well. And I would encourage you to model yourself a lot after what Mark's doing in this particular presentation. Again, visual aids are not required for this particular class. I would encourage you to think about using them, especially if you're choosing a topic that involves some kind of visual image, if you're trying to describe something or demonstrate something. It's probably pretty important that you use visual aids. If you're going to do a speech on CPR, right, it's not enough to just talk about that. You probably actually need to demonstrate it, or you actually need to show us, through, images or pictures or something of that nature when you're doing your presentation. Again, you do not have to just record yourself at home. If you are here at campus or whatever it might be, you can try to, use a classroom or use what we call the One Button Studio, which is down in the first floor of the library. Record yourself and then upload your speech to Blackboard and so forth for my viewing pleasure. We'll see you next time, guys. Have a good day.